At 74, Guy Madison reportedly revealed the truth he had hidden for decades. The cowboy idol who sold cereal and cap guns had loved men in secret. He spoke of parties behind shuttered doors, of coded glances on backlots, of names he would never say on camera. The confession, friends recall, cut through the varnish of his image. It threatened contracts, reputations, and the way fans remembered a gentle American hero. Was it courage at last, or a final unburdening before the lights went out? To understand why he hid, and why he finally spoke, we have to return to the first dust roads he walked, long before Hollywood learned his name. He was born Robert Ozell Mosley in Kern County, California, in 1922. The place was small, sunlit, and windblown. Pumpkins grew in rows near the road. Oil derricks nodded in the distance like tired iron horses. His father worked steady hours. His mother kept the house warm and strict. Money was scarce, but pride was firm. The Great Depression pressed down on every porch step. Boys grew up fast, or they were left behind. Robert did chores before school and again after supper. He rode horses when he could borrow a saddle. He learned quiet manners and a ready smile. Neighbors noticed his straight posture and bright eyes. They also noticed he listened more than he talked. California in those years felt both rough and inviting. Farm trucks rattled past dance halls and new cinemas. Saturday nights offered fiddle tunes, soda pop, and restraint. Churches taught modesty. Town gossips kept private life under watch. The radio brought crooners into kitchens and barns. Bing Crosby sang an easy dream into long afternoons. Cowboy songs floated from porch radios at sundown. Gene Autry sold a vision of straight-shooting goodness. Young Robert liked the sound of that code. Be polite. Be brave. Be true. He tucked the simple rules inside his pocket. The wider world grew harsher by the year. In Los Angeles, police broke up bars known for coded nights. Newspapers mocked men who did not fit the mold. Studio publicists learned to bury anything that looked suspect. After 1934, the Hays Code sealed the ideal even tighter. The screen allowed romance, but only within strict lines. Public life allowed flirtation, but only under chaperoned lights. Boys learned to keep their secrets soft and silent. They learned to hide them under laughter and work. When war came, Robert enlisted with thousands of others. He trained as a Navy radio operator and shipped out. The ocean stretched forever. Metal decks burned in the Pacific Sunday. The headphones pressed grooves into his temples. Messages crackled and vanished like birds in fog. He learned patience and calm under pressure. He also learned how sudden a life could end. On leave, he walked Los Angeles streets with cautious wonder. Hollywood storefronts flashed neon promises at twilight. He did not plan on being a star. He only wanted a hot meal and a quiet bed. But fate prefers crowded sidewalks and open eyes. One afternoon, a talent scout studied the tall sailor in line. The man asked his name. Robert answered in that measured, gentle way. A door cracked open. The light spilled across the floor. He took one step toward it, and then another. The sailor in line met a man who spoke in polished tones. He introduced himself as Henry Wilson. He represented handsome boys who could learn fast. He liked Robert's quiet smile and broad shoulders. He liked the way the uniform seemed natural, not posed. He suggested a new name with a brighter ring. Guy Madison. It sounded simple and clean. It sounded like a boy you could trust. Papers were signed. A path appeared where only curiosity had stood. The first break came during the war years. David O. Selznick's office needed a fresh face. They cast the young sailor in Since You Went Away. The part was small, but the camera loved him. He looked like every letter home promised better days. Fan mail arrived by sacks, not handfuls. Women wrote from farm kitchens and factory floors. Soldiers wrote from barracks with aching jokes and bold wishes. The studio noticed the flood and smiled. A heartthrob without a past was a publicist's dream. Lessons followed at a punishing pace. Diction, movement, fencing, riding. He studied until midnight, and then again at dawn. Coaches corrected his vowels and his nerves. He watched older actors hit their marks and breathe. He learned to listen before speaking. The camera rewarded patience and sincerity. He carried both, like tools in a pocket. Then came Till the End of Time in 1946. Guy played a Marine adjusting to civilian life. Robert Mitchum stood beside him with easy swagger. Dorothy McGuire brought steady warmth and quiet ache. The film captured the nation's uneasy return to normal. Guy's restraint matched the moment. Reviewers used words like earnest and unspoiled. Audiences leaned in and felt seen. The studio leaned in too. They saw a dependable lead for the post-war years. More pictures followed in quick succession. Honeymoon in 1947 paired him with Shirley Temple. Westerns and adventure films framed the jawline and the stance. He rode well and looked right in a hat. He shook hands with rodeo champions and learned their rhythms. Publicity shots placed him under clean skies and bright banners. Photographers called him the new American silhouette. The phrase stuck to magazine covers and soda ads. Television exploded at mid-century and changed everything. In 1951, he strapped on a holster for the adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. The series ran through most of the decade. A radio version carried his voice to kitchens and cars. Kids ate cereal with his face on the box. Comic books sent him from prairie to canyon in bold panels. Parade floats rolled under confetti with his name painted large. He signed thousands of autographs without losing his smile. He shook fathers' hands and tipped hats to mothers. He knelt to talk with children at eye level. The niceness felt real, and people trusted it. Studio life looked polished from the street. Inside, it ran on careful illusions. Publicists arranged dates and posed photographs. Gossip columnists received winks and denials on schedule. The Hays Code still ruled every story told on screen. It also ruled the stories told about the stars. Guy learned the rules by heart and followed them. He knew how much one rumor could cost. The hat felt heavier than it looked. The holster pinched when the camera cut. The applause grew louder, and the rooms grew smaller. Soon, the double life would demand its price. He learned early that affection needed shadows to survive. Backlots after dark, private homes in the hills, quiet hotels under assumed names. In those rooms, the voice softened and the posture relaxed. The man called Guy could be Robert again. He could laugh without watching the door. Friends remembered the hush before the needle dropped on a Sinatra record. They remembered long pauses, slow dances, and a vow about silence. Nothing leaves this house. Nothing reaches the columns. Hollywood had its coded map. A florist who knew which table to reserve. A dresser who slipped a note into a jacket sleeve. A beach cove where photographers rarely climbed the rocks. He moved carefully along that map, guided by friends and chance. Confidants later recalled a tender patience that surprised them. The cowboy image promised swagger. The man preferred listening, tea, and long walks after midnight. He wrote brief notes on hotel stationery, then tore them up. He kept the torn halves in separate drawers. Names swirled across decades, sometimes whispered, sometimes printed. Biographers note quiet evenings with a legendary silent-era star whose house held a chapel's hush. They point to cordial warmth with a fox-like leading man whose smile could light a theater. They mention a shy heartthrob who hid behind mirrors and stage doors. They recall a giant among screen idols who feared the tabloid lens more than any villain. There were even stories about a billionaire recluse who collected people like rare planes. Each claim arrives with qualifiers and careful verbs. Reportedly, said to. Contemporaries recalled. The core truth remained steady. The rooms were private because public life punished tenderness. The studio system tightened the seal. Contracts contained morality clauses with vague, sharp edges. If a headline suggested abnormal conduct, salaries could freeze. If a gossip item hinted at strange companionship, a role could vanish. Publicists arranged evening drives with actresses between premieres. Columnists received photographs of polite hand-holding under the moon. He played along when needed. He also learned to negotiate small mercies. A weekend at the desert ranch instead of a crowded opening. A fishing trip photo shoot that ended early so he could disappear. He offered the company everything they asked for on camera. In return, he asked for quiet, and sometimes got it. There were fragile pockets of joy. A road tour in the early 50s led to a railway compartment shared with a fellow actor. They spoke about fear, faith, and loneliness between station bells. In Italy, years later, a producer's villa offered shelter by the sea. The laughter ran freer in a country where he was less watched. Sunlight fell across the table at breakfast. Someone reached for his hand and did not let go. He called those days a reprieve, not a victory. The clock always started again on the flight home. Rumors still gathered like summer thunder. A valet talked for money. A driver bragged at a bar. A columnist asked a question with a trap inside it. The studio's smile grew fixed. Meeting requests turned into warnings. A file began to fill with clippings, dates, and anxious memos. One night, stepping from a side door into an alley of flashbulbs, he understood the next season would be different. The threshold between secrecy and exposure had narrowed to a single step. The flashbulbs found him against a painted wall near sunset. A column ran 2 days later with a coy headline about cowboy nights. Names were not printed. Yet everyone understood the wink. The studio called at dawn and spoke in polished, frozen tones. Public confidence is delicate. Morality clauses are binding. We expect your cooperation. He thanked them and set the receiver down. The room felt smaller than it had the night before. Pressure arrived in practiced waves. A chaperoned date was arranged for the weekend. A photo spread promised a wholesome afternoon with borrowed puppies. A magazine profile praised his gentlemanly interest in a rising starlet. The script for a new film sat on his desk, then vanished without comment. Another part went to a louder personality with a shorter fuse. He felt the ground tilt under neat carpets and bright office lamps. He understood the arithmetic. A rumor could cost a season. A headline could cost a career. He met the press with a calm smile and careful words. He praised hard work, honest roles, and the kindness of fans. He offered nothing that could be twisted into scandal. The questions grew sharper and more personal. One reporter asked where he spent his off hours. He answered with ranch talk, fishing holes, and morning coffee on the porch. He told the truth to protect a deeper truth. He kept private love inside a locked room of memory. The middle 50s rewarded gossip like a sport. Confidential sold rumors like candy and fear like knives. Studios bought silence when they could afford it. They sacrificed quieter actors when budgets shrank. He lost a feature, and then another. Guest shots on television kept the lights burning. The months between jobs grew longer. Friends stopped by with pie and steady voices. They closed the curtains and sat until midnight. He walked them to their cars and waved from the porch. Then he stood alone and listened to the street. The toll reached beyond the ledger. Sleep turned thin and jumpy. Church became a back pew and a quick exit. He wrote letters he never mailed. A romance ended because constant watch hollowed it out. Another began and could not root in dry ground. He learned the rules of survival. Say less. Move quietly. Let distance cool the fever. Europe began to sound like a plan, not a retreat. He packed the hat, the boots, and the quiet manners. The ticket bore his name in clean ink. The plane lifted into a night without cameras. Europe offered new pages and fewer prying eyes. He landed in Rome and felt his shoulders drop. Producers shook his hand and praised the American look. Directors liked the calm gaze and measured voice. He rode different horses across Spanish plains. He marched through war pictures and desert adventures. The schedules were quick. The money arrived on time. The interviews were polite and brief. He worked and slept and walked under unfamiliar stars. The move brought a kind of mercy. The gossip columns back home grew bored. The magazines covered fresher scandals and newer faces. He slipped from the loudest rooms without a slam. In Italy, he found a circle of friends who asked little. Dinners stretched late. Secrets stayed where they belonged, at the table. A companion traveled with him for a season. Later, another joined him by the sea. Biographers note tenderness without headlines and laughter without aliases. He called that period a long breath after years of holding air. Time still pushed its price across the counter. Hollywood changed and did not change. The code softened, then crumbled. New stories hinted at shadows once forbidden. Some men spoke privately about truth and safety. Others stayed silent and watched the tide. He felt both relief and caution. Freedom had arrived late and uneven. A wrong word could still unlock a file in a desk. He returned to California with quieter plans. A ranch waited past the city's last streetlight. He walked fence lines at dawn and watched hawks circle. Fans wrote letters that smelled faintly of attic cedar. He answered as many as he could. He thanked them for the years and the kindness. Television offered guest roles and reunion specials. Conventions invited him to sign glossies and reminisce. He shook hands and listened to stories from fathers and sons. The cowboy had become a memory people wanted to touch. The industry gave him a small garland near the end, an award for Western legacy, handed over with applause. He smiled and held it like a fragile cup. He thought about stuntmen who had caught him when a saddle slipped. He thought about friends who had kept faith and kept quiet. He thought about the rooms where the music played low. Reportedly, he spoke more openly with trusted friends as the years gathered. Not a confession, they said, but a gentle acknowledgement. He had loved well, and he had paid a cost for that love. Illness narrowed the days in his final season. He kept his voice kind and his eyes steady. He trusted that the people who mattered already knew the truth. The rest, he believed, belonged to the soul and to time. The prairie light outside his window held steady. He breathed with it, and he let the past grow softer. The road behind him had been long, harsh, and strangely tender. The road ahead asked only for honesty, and at last, he felt ready. He once said that a man was not only what the camera caught, a man was also what he guarded when the lights went off. That became his quiet creed. Keep the kindness. Protect the private heart. Hold fast to loyalty. He had played heroes who never flinched. Off-screen, he learned that courage sometimes meant saying little and loving anyway. The cost of that choice was real. Roles vanished, headlines teased, friends drifted. Yet the smaller circle that remained felt truer than any poster on a wall. Look at the legacy without the varnish. A farm boy named Robert found a stage name and a nation's smile. He worked hard, stayed gentle, and gave people a figure to root for. He also carried a secret through years that punished tenderness. The culture was not ready, but the heart does not wait for permission. He built a life within careful borders and still found room for joy. He learned that survival could look like a quiet dinner, a safe hand, and a door that locks. What do we do with his story now? We listen for the human pulse beneath the myth. We honor the courage it took to protect love under watchful eyes. We measure fame against the cost of silence. If this moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Who else should we revisit with honest light and open eyes? Subscribe for more stories of lives lived in shadow and the bravery it took to step into morning.